Good evening. On behalf of Eco Canada, welcome to Tutti Tavola online cooking experiences. This year, Tutti Tavola is promoted and financed by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, carried out by Assocamere Estero in collaboration with the Italian Chambers of Commerce abroad to strengthen and to protect the authentic Italian products. Tonight, Chef Roberto Fracchioni will present Pasta Priminverno. Our chef has a deep knowledge of authentic Italian products and certified ingredients, and during this class, he will tell us all about Taleggio cheese DOP and Coppa Piacentina DOP, two ingredients that can be used in so many different ways to make your recipes full of flavors and unforgettable. With Chef Roberto Fracchioni, we're pleased to welcome back Jenny Arena, a food writer who has been journaling stories and recipes in her blog, Fables and Focaccia, for over a decade, with a special focus on the traditions of Italian cuisine. As we celebrate our 60th anniversary at the Chamber, become a member at a special entry level of $200, and don't forget to order our authentic Italian dishes featured during the Buonissimo event on May 18 at Aria Buono Cibo Locale, Oretta and Teroni restaurants. They will be available until June 20th. Let me take a moment to express our thanks to Genke Overwill, tonight's sponsor, for its continued support over the years and for making Taleggio and Coppa Piacentina available to us this evening. Genke Overwill shops the world and brings in exceptional meats, cheeses, and groceries from Italy as well as from many other countries that you can find in all major grocery stores. Tonight, Genke Overwill is offering another beautiful gift basket full of great foods to one of you. Last week, Karen was the lucky winner, and all you need to do to be eligible to enter the draw this evening is stay connected until the end of the class. So it's time to start. So I'd like to say hello to Jenny and Roberto. How are you this evening?
Buonasera. Thank you, Tiziana. I'm very happy to be back.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us for these two classes. And welcome back, Roberto.
Thank you for having me again.
So I guess you're ready to start. So I'll leave you the stage and then I'll go backstage and see you later.
Ciao, Tiziana. Hello, Chef. How are you this evening?
I'm awesome, Jenny. I'm going to try and not speak as much as last week.
First off, tonight you're cooking again with two certified products, the Coppa Piacentina and the Taleggio. And I just wanted to remind everybody that these are the symbols we're looking for, right, Roberto?
Always, always, always.
So one is the DOP and one is the IGP. Can you just give us a quick rundown of what those mean and why it's important to look for those?
So DOP and IGP, they are European designation. They're not just Italian, and that's a very important thing. It's an independent association in Europe that is basically a seal of quality to products that are produced in very specific regions with very specific methods, and there has to be some lineage. There has to be a tradition. It can't be just, I raise pigs and I'm going to put a DOP logo on it. They have to follow a very strict code of conduct. Now, IGP is a little different than DOP. DOP means that every step of the process is done in a very specific region. So, for example, the Coppa, there's 3 breeds of pigs that can be used to produce the Coppa. It has to be produced with certain ingredients in a very specific region in Piacenza, in the region around Piacenza, and it has to be packaged and shipped from that location. IGP is a little bit, it's not as strict. One of those steps can be done outside of the region. So the packaging, for example, can be done in a different region, or the feed for the pigs can be, produced in a different region, but they are both assurances of quality.
Okay, perfect. So we want to make sure we look for those products. And tonight's products, the Taleggio and the Coppa, definitely have those seals. And you're going to show us how to use them in a wonderful Pasta Priminverno. So my first question, of course, is that name. Where did it come from?
So, I mean, everyone knows pasta primavera. It's, the springtime pasta. So it's spring vegetables, usually served in a light, olive oil sauce, very fresh, very springy. I could show you how to do a primavera, but it's a little generic. So I wanted to have some fun. So I chose the taleggio because taleggio traditionally was made in the fall and the winter in northern Italy. So inverno means winter. So instead of primavera, it's prima inverno because we're mixing springtime vegetables with a winter cheese. And we're going to see how it turns out.
Sounds like a nice combo. So I'll let you get started, and we'll continue to ask questions along the way.
Okay, awesome. All right, so today's pasta, yes, it is a very simple pasta. Now, pasta primavera, I do like to show people how to make a primavera because it is quite simple if you follow a few simple rules. First of all, find the best spring vegetables that you can find. So a trip to the grocery store, a trip to the market, you can come up with a lot of different vegetables this time of year. So you basically just grab whatever looks good. As long as there's nothing that is too strongly flavored. For example, our fennel. So our fennel is probably the most strongly flavored ingredient out of all of our vegetables. So to compensate for that big flavor, we're just going to use a little bit of it. The other ingredients, we have some asparagus. We're right at the tail end of asparagus right now. We have some fresh peas, and I'm just going to quickly, prepare these ingredients. Now, with the primavera, it's easy to just, go along, grab your asparagus, chop, and throw it in. But you know what? We want to put a little more love into it than that. So with asparagus, what I always do with asparagus is I always cut the tips on an angle. And I don't know why, I just think it looks a lot better. So what we're going to do is cut it into really small pieces, just slice it on an angle so that it's got a point, even the piece that you cut off. Now, before we make our next cut, we're going to roll the asparagus a little bit. So roll it toward yourself about a third of a turn, and then you make another cut on an angle. You roll it, cut it, roll it, cut it, roll it, cut it, and you end up with pieces of asparagus that just kind of look a little bit prettier, I think, anyway. With, like instead of just, a square cut, making them all look like wagon wheels. I don't know. Seriously, these just look a little bit nicer. To me, they look a little more organic, like a little more natural.
You've got a chop and roll instead of a rock and roll technique there.
Oh, I like that. Can I use that, Jen?
Absolutely. It's yours, Rebecca.
Done. So I'm just going to do the other asparagus, and we have some nice little spears of asparagus that look, like I said, a little more interesting than just a regular straight cut. Our other ingredient, you really can't do a primavera without peas. So these are some nice big peas. We're just going to open them up. These are really nice peas. Wow.
Beautiful.
And we're going to pop them out and get them ready for the cooking.
Okay, so are you going to pop those in just like that, or will you blanch them a little bit first?
I'm not going to blanch them because they're going to have quite a bit of time in the pot, in the pan. Now, blanching, I try not to blanch my vegetables because a lot of nutrients, a lot of vitamins, minerals are water soluble. So when they go into the water, a lot of the nutrients are leached out into the water. Great if you're trying to make a vegetable stock, but we want to try and keep as much in there as we can. So I'm going to cook it in the pan with all the other vegetables.
Very nice.
A couple of grape tomatoes we have. So a quick little chop of our grape tomatoes. We're just going to cut them in half, leave them nice and big. And a couple other ingredients that I have over here already, cut up. I needed a little color. So I just grabbed a little bit of yellow peppers. We're not going to use a ton of them. Just going to use a little bit more for color than anything. A little bit of zucchini, a little diced green zucchini because, it's zucchini. So it goes well with everything.
Of course.
A little bit of red onions. So diced up little red onions. They don't have to be red onions. They can be regular onions. I just like the flavor of red onions. And we're going to get to our fennel. So I want to show people how to dice fennel properly because a lot of people struggle with it. So you can just take your fennel and slice it into little pieces. This works really, really well when you're doing a salad because you get these cool little shapes. These look like the Star Trek badges that are kind of cool. But in the pasta, they're just a little bit too big. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to dice the fennel. So to dice the fennel, you just want to keep it together, keep it whole. And what we do, this is the root side. We put the root side down. I've trimmed off the stalks. And then from the top, we're just going to make some cuts down, not all the way to the bottom, because we want to keep it all together.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like we're making a blooming onion. Get that reference from that horrible Roadhouse? I can't remember what Roadhouse it is that does that deep fried onion rings that look like this.
Mm-hmm.
So what you end up with is a fennel that has all these nice little cross hatches in it. And then you turn it on its side and you just put your knife down and you get a nice small dice. The thinner you slice it, the thinner your dice. So it really only takes a few seconds to get a nice consistent, which is important, dice of fennel. That's it.
All right.
Pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
So another ingredient that we're going to use are some carrots. I like adding carrots, especially to this dish, because the taleggio is it's a fairly strong cheese. It's fairly rich. It's fairly, the tasting notes, if you read tasting notes for taleggio, they always say it has an aftertaste of truffles. But it's a little bit more earthier than that. We'll get into why a little bit later, but what I want to do is I want to compensate for that with a little bit of sweetness. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to use a little bit of carrots, just regular old baby carrots, but they're very dense. So if I do a tiny, tiny dice of carrot, it's just going to kind of get lost in the dish. So instead, with a peeler, I'm just going to peel off the skin really quick of our carrot. And then once our skin is gone, we're just going to use the peeler to shave little pieces of the carrot. So we just kind of swipe at it like an angry cat. And you get these little shaves of carrot. Now you can make them super long. Mm-hmm. You can make them super short. It really doesn't matter. I'm going for about 2 inches long, and we're just going to use our shaved. It makes a mess, by the way. It goes all over the kitchen.
That's okay.
But hey, cleaning up is fun, right?
That's it. There you go. Isn't there a rule that whoever doesn't cook does the cleaning? So.
Yeah. I need to see that somewhere. So we also have a white carrot. So I'm going to do the same thing, or yellow carrot. Same thing. Take off our skin. You can eat the skin. It's absolutely fine. But I just find it tastes a little bit like dirt. I don't know why. They just taste like dirt. So we just peel off a little bit more white or yellow carrot, and our vegetables are prepped. Now, the one thing that Pasta Primavera really, 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 really loves and needs are fava beans.
Oh, I love fava beans.
Fresh fava beans. Unfortunately, the season's kind of over for fresh favas. I couldn't find any. I called my suppliers and they all, laughed at me. Very politely laughed at me, but it was still a laugh. So what I'm going to do instead is I just use some canned fava beans. Better canned fava beans than no fava beans.
No, exactly.
Yeah, if this will add to the richness of the dish. It's just unfortunate that their color on the screen, they look really brown, but they just don't have that bright green color of a fresh fava. So unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, this is cooking, right? Like, recipes are guidelines. Play a little bit, experiment a little bit.
Could you use frozen potentially as well?
You could, you absolutely could, as long as you take them out and you thaw them ahead of time. They're completely fine to use frozen.
Perfect.
Yeah. So the first step that we do to actually cook the pasta or to make the sauce is to deal with our beautiful piece of coppa. So coppa piacentina is like, I hold this very dear. This is as a kid, I remember going to Italy because I'm from Piacenza. So I mean, as a kid, we ate coppa every single day. Like it was just it's like bologna for us, right? We just ate it every day. And when we were leaving, I would always, fill a suitcase with one or two pieces, usually a piece of prosciutto as well. But there was always coppa in the suitcase. I'm not ashamed to say that it still happens today. I still do it because
we won't tell customs that.
because the coppa that I usually bring home is the stuff that my uncles make, the stuff that my cousins make. The product that we get here in Canada is still spectacular. There are a lot of producers in Piacenza, which is the region that the coppa comes from, that make coppa, but there's very few that are going through the regulations to be able to export it into Canada. So if they want to export the cured meat into Canada, they have to follow the regulations of the FDA. So the coppa that we do get here in Canada does have sulfates and or nitrates in it because that's a Canadian regulation. I'm not sure. I can't get a straight answer why they have to do it with coppa, but they don't have to do it with other cured meats.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of cured meats, single muscle cured meats that come into Canada that don't have sulfates and nitrates. But for some reason, coppas all do. So it's not a ton. When you do taste it, you can't taste the sulfates and nitrates like you can with a lot of Canadian produced cured meats. Now, I don't think it's just my palate. I know that it's very pronounced. So this is a lot cleaner, a lot sweeter. You taste more of the spices than you do the sulfates. So it's a wonderful, wonderful product. This comes from a single muscle that sits right here. If I was a pig, it'd be right there. So it's from the neck muscle, and it extends down into about the second or third rib on a pig. There's only 3 breeds of pigs that can be used to produce coppa, and then the spice and the salt that goes onto it is up to each producer. So each producer has their own recipe that they tell stories was handed down from 3000 BC from some emperor somewhere. They all have these great stories about their spice mixtures. But regardless, it's a lot. It has a lot more flavor. It's a lot sweeter and a lot spicier than a lot of other single muscle cured meats.
Okay. Can I ask a question, Chef? Is it coppa and is it one and the same, or are they two different things? Capigolo and coppa.
So they are similar.
Okay.
So they're made from the same cut. They're made from the same neck muscle. But the pigs that are used for capicolo are usually a lot smaller, and the spicing is very, very, very different. So capicolo is more popular in the South. It usually has more spices, like actual, peppers.
Yes. Well, see, I'm Calabrese, so I know capigolo. That's why I'm asking.
Yes, agabogol. Oh, you got to say it right. Agabogol. So you know how it's like spicy, right? Like it can have a tendency to be kind of like sopressata with an actual bite of pepper to it. Coppa piacentina has no spice to it. The only spice, spice is in hot, spicy, is from pepper, from black pepper. So there's no chilies, there's nothing like that to make it very, very spicy. And because the 3 breeds of pigs that are used for coppa are sort of the 3 largest breeds, Duroc, Landraque, and Biancone. They tend to be about 550 pounds by the time they're processed. They're bigger than this table. It's scary to see these guys. Wow. So they tend to be a lot larger. Curing process is the same. These coppas are usually about 6 months that they're cured for, but it all depends how large they are. I've seen some that were cured over a year, and they just needed a year because they're so big.
Because of the size.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the nasty bits of the copa. So in Italy, my uncles would always take the tips off. They wouldn't eat it because it's too dry, it's too hard. They wouldn't eat the tips of the copa. They would dice it up, and they would use it for to reward their truffle dogs. When the dogs went out to find truffles, when they came back with a truffle, they would just take a little piece of this and give it to the dog and say, "Good boy."
Lucky
dogs
dogs
are happy. Yeah, they were. But we're going to use this because for cooking purposes, this has a lot of flavor. Because it's smaller, it tends to be drier than the main muscle, the main part of the copa. It tends to be drier, but it also has a lot more flavor. It really has a lot more flavor because it has more time, more contact with the spices and the salt and the air when it's hung to cure. So I'm just going to dice this up. Now you can see it's nice and fatty. Okay, so copa's fatty. Okay, it should be fatty. See, when you cut it, sometimes you get these little pockets of fat that are kind of oozing out. That's flavor country. So it is fatty, and don't be afraid of it. In this dish, we're using very little fat other than the natural fat that's coming out of the copa. So we just do a nice small dice. And I mean, I do a small dice. You can leave it a little bit bigger. But because this is so strong, like I said, the flavor is so strong. If you leave the pieces too big, when you get a large piece of it in your mouth, it just tends to overpower the whole dish. And we want a nice balance.
Okay, so, and if someone can't find the copa for this recipe, is there something you can use as a substitution?
Yeah, capicola would probably be the closest, for sure, but you just have to deal with the spiciness of it. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they make sweet capicola too. It's not that different. It's just when you taste copa, it has a much more earthy spice, like nutmeg, kind of flavor to it, as opposed to capicola, which tends to be more like hard herbs, like rosemary kind of flavors. So yeah. So our first step is we're going to start cooking our copa. So have a little pot over here that we're going to put on a nice low flame. So I'm putting this right down as cool as it'll go. So number one, I'm going to put a drop of olive oil, like just a tiny bit of olive oil to start the cooking process. And again, you want to see that?
That's
la,
it.
La, la, la.
Yellow seal or the red.
So we're just going to put a drop in. I'd say there's like a teaspoon of oil, not even a teaspoon of olive oil in our pan. And we're just going to put our copa into the pan and we're going to start cooking it. Now, what we want to do is we want to cook this very, very slowly and for a nice long time. We're going to render the fat out of the copa. Basically, we want all the fat to melt and coat the bottom of the pan because that's going to give our sauce a ton of flavor.
Wow.
If you don't cook it, like you can, if you give it a quick saute, it's not only will you like burn the fat and will it taste, I don't know, not so fresh, but it just dries out the meat, and your meat will be these hard little bullets of little cubes of meat, which are not good for anyone.
That's not appealing at all.
Did I make it sound not appealing? I was that was my goal. I was trying to do that.
A lot more mouth-watering.
So, have you tried copa before, Jenny? Are you familiar with it?
Fabulous, yes. It's really, the flavor. It is a very different flavor from the capicola that I'm used to, which again, the spiciness of a capicola, which differs from that. It's a lovely meat for sure.
Yeah, they're both beautiful. Like I love them both. But for me, it's just growing up eating copa every day. It's just always been, I don't know, near and dear to my heart. I can honestly say I can't remember the last time I haven't had a piece of copa in my fridge. Like it's just always there, always
It's one of
there.
those things.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So our vegetables are all ready to go. Our sauce is, started very, very slowly. So we're going to talk a second about taleggio, unless there's any other questions about copa.
About the copa, no, but we do have someone who's just asking if fava beans and lupini beans are similar. If
They are.
okay.
Yeah, you can substitute. Yes, I shouldn't say yeah. Yes, you can substitute lupini beans as well.
Okay.
Either frozen or canned. But I mean, fresh is the way to go. They just have such a different flavor when they're fresh. And like I said, I scoured high and low, and I couldn't find any. So unfortunately, I'm using canned. But we'll still get the richness. We'll still get the flavor coming through. They just won't look as pretty. Sorry.
Yeah.
Wow, it's hot in here today. Okay, so we're going to talk briefly, well, not briefly, we can talk for a while, about taleggio. So taleggio is a cheese that I like to talk about, I like to use, because it is a very misunderstood cheese. I find that when people think of taleggio, they think of, well, it's kind of like, gorgonzola, it's super stinky. It shouldn't be. Okay, like a good taleggio should not be overly stinky. It's going to smell. Okay, taleggio it's it's a very fragrant cheese.
Mm-hmm.
But the crazy thing about taleggio, the one thing that I love about it, is that its taste is much sweeter and much milder than its scent. Generally, I mean, as a chef, I smell everything. I feel like a dog some days. I'm like sniffing my basil, and it's something that we do. We smell everything that we cook. And taleggio is one of the few things that when you smell it, you get a sense of what it's going to taste like. And then when you actually taste it, you're surprised. So the stinkiness comes from the curing process. So taleggio is, it's unpasteurized milk. It is, formed into little wheels, usually dry salted, but sometimes salted in a brine.
Mm-hmm.
But then after it goes to aging, it's only aged for a minimum of 35 days, but generally people are pushing 45, 50 days. But when it's aging on these little wood boards, a lot of mold develops. Now, for a proper taleggio, there are 5 different types of mold that develop on taleggio. Yeah, so when you see taleggio, like aging in one of the cheese producers sitting on shelves, it looks like these rectangles of snowballs because there's just so much mold happening on there, but different color molds. But they're all good molds. They're all happy, healthy, delicious molds. So to combat the amount of mold and to kind of control it, it is washed with a salt water once a week. So every week, someone is going through, taking off, washing it with salt water, making sure that the mold is staying in check and not getting out of hand. That salt washing not only controls the mold, but it also helps the flavor of all those molds penetrate down into the cheese. And that's what gives it such a distinct flavor. Now, the rind is completely edible, but it is very, very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
So when we open this up, I always feel like a kid at Christmas when I open up these beautiful little packaging. We open it up, out comes our taleggio.
Beautiful.
And again, we see the logo, knowing that we're getting the good stuff. And we have our little paper on the inside, usually tells you the producer. And then you can see that the cheese itself, this is a half of a wheel, or they call it a wheel even though it's rectangle, but it's a half of a piece. And so it's cut right in the middle, and the texture in the center is completely, completely different than the texture on the outside. It's very, very soft, very white because this is a young taleggio.
Mm-hmm.
The older it gets, the more pinkish it'll get, just like the rind. So I'm going to take the rind off, or sorry, the paper off so we can see the rind.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it has this very, very distinct pinkish, like salmon color to it. And the older it gets, the darker this color becomes. So once we pull all this off, we get a good look at the skin. And like I said, 100% completely edible. You could eat this. You will not be sick. You will actually be quite happy if you like stronger flavored cheeses. But for this recipe, I'm not going to cook with the rinds. I'm just going to cook with the cheese from the inside, the nice gooey. It's like a good camembert.
I was just going to say, to me, it resembles like a camembert or a brie, like just by looking at it. Of course, I tasted it and it tastes different than that, but that's what it looks like.
Yeah, so it does, and it's always shocking. And I have to say, in my life as an executive chef, Taleggio was probably the cheese that I was more disappointed with than any other cheese, because quite often when I get it from a supplier, it's vacuum packed, or it's in not like a hard vacuum pack, but it's in a plastic bag. It's overaged, and the inside smells as, you know, stronger than the rind. So more often than not, I would get Taleggio and I wouldn't be able to use it, and I'd have to send it back to my supplier, try again, send it back, try again, send it back. So finding a good supplier, like Gently Overwheel, of Taleggio is very, very important, because you don't want it to sit around too long. This cheese is still alive. It is still aging. It is still maturing. It is still absorbing flavors. So it has to be handled properly, or else it will go bad and be completely awful very quickly. So we do have to take care of it.
So what's the best way then, if you're going to go out and purchase a piece, and obviously, like, especially if you're getting a piece that size, you're not going to consume it right away. What's the best way optimally?
I mean, the rule of thumb with Taleggio, I always tell people, buy what you're going to eat. Okay, so it's not like a piece of, you know, Parmigiano Reggiano that you can buy a big piece and pitch it in your fridge and keep it for weeks and weeks and it's fine. Taleggio is much, much, much more delicate. So buy what you're going to eat. If you do have any extras, again, it is living, it is breathing, it needs to breathe. If you wrap it in saran wrap and you put it in your fridge, within 2 days, it won't be fit for human consumption. It'll just be so strong. You'll open your fridge in the morning and be like, what the heck died in there? So you can't wrap it in plastic. It needs to breathe. So it should be wrapped in, like, usually I do like a paper towel, usually dampen it a little bit, or if it's a large piece, I'll just use one of these, you know, kitchen rags. It's like a linen rag, a cloth rag, moisten it, wrap it, and then put that into like a Ziploc, but don't seal the Ziploc.
Okay.
You keep the Ziploc open. The biggest challenge is that it's going to off gas. Like you will get the scent permeating through your fridge a little bit. So this is, you know, all the more reason to have a beer fridge in the garage, so you can go slide it out there, because the beers are sealed, so they won't, you know,
they won't pick up the scent.
So yeah, as long as you do that, you should be able to keep it for, you know, quite a bit of time, as long as you take care of it. But if you completely seal it up, no, not very good.
Okay.
So we're going to go back to our sauce now, because this is a fairly simple dish. So I'm kind of dragging it out, but we're going to add our onions to our colpa. So the colpa now, I don't know how long that's been, but I can pick them up now with my fingers, and see, it's not so hot that I can't just pick one up in my fingers, and I can just sort of break it apart. It's crumbly, it's soft enough that I can just break it apart into small pieces. When it's that soft, that's when we know that all the fat has been rendered off, and we're ready to start cooking the rest of our vegetables. So our red onions go in, and we give them a little toss. Now, what we want to do is do the same thing. We want to sweat the red onions, have them cook off nice and slow so that they get soft. Basically the same technique that's used for a risotto. You want to cook them slow so that they completely dissolve. Not completely, because we do want some little red specks in it at the end. And we're also going to add our fennel. So with this dish, it's about really the secret is to think about your ingredients and see which ones are going to take more time to cook, and the ones that are harder will get cooked first. They'll go in the pan in the beginning, and slowly we're going to introduce all the other vegetables. Now, you can cook them all separately. Like you're making a caponata, cook your copa, take it out of the pan. Cook your onions, take it out of the pan. But it's going to turn into a 6-hour prep time. And I don't think there's enough wine in Ontario to keep somebody engaged doing that. So we're going to do it all together, but we're just going to stagger when we add our vegetables. Kind of makes sense. And if you're off a little bit, it's not the end of the world. If your fennel gets a little soft, I mean, doesn't matter. No one's gonna. I don't think anyone will complain if you're cooking them a nice pasta and everything is good. So the taleggio, I said in the beginning that it is a winter cheese. Traditionally, it is a winter cheese. Nowadays, the production is all year long. So I kind of, lied with the Priminverno. It's kind of a little bit of a creative license I took there. It is available all year long, which is great because even in August, you can get a piece of taleggio from J&K and it'll be great. It'll be perfect. It'll be fresh. It won't be overripe, and you'll be fine even if you're eating it in the hot summer months.
Okay, perfect. So both of the products, the copa and the taleggio, are relatively easy to find in like a specialty, I would say like a specialty deli or like an Italian grocer.
For sure, but even some of the big boys. I mean, J&K Overwheel, they have a very good distribution system. So even some of the larger grocery stores, the copa for sure. I've seen it and I've seen J&K's actual copa, no one else's, in larger grocery stores. The taleggio, it's kind of hit and miss. Some of them do, some of them don't. It all depends on, how much cheese they sell, basically.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely, all the fine Italian food stores will have it. Okay, so our fennel, our onions, our fennel are in. So next, we're going to add our peas. So as you asked, Jenny, because these are raw and these are actually quite giant. Like, they're pretty big peas. I'm going to add them in now so that they have a nice long time to cook and get nice and soft. Same time, I'm going to add my diced peppers because the peppers are fairly dense as well. So in goes our peppers, and we just start sauteing. So I don't know if you picked up on this, but I'm kind of stirring this quite a bit as opposed to picking it up and sauteing. And the only reason is that I'm cooking on induction. So every time I take it every time I take the pan off the induction, it beeps at me. It doesn't like that to be done. It beeps at me and it cuts out for a couple seconds. So I'm kind of doing it this way.
We don't want to upset your stove at this point.
No, we just want to take our time and kind of do it the way most people would do it at home. Although sauteing is a very important part of learning to be a good cook, is learning how to saute, and it's really not that hard. So our taleggio is there. Our pasta water is boiling, so I'm going to salt my pasta water now.
Okay, which is perfect because someone has a question about salting the water. What is the exact point to do it, and what type of salt?
That's a tough one. So the way that I was always taught was to make the pasta water taste like the ocean. That's what everyone always says. Make it taste like the ocean, make it taste like the ocean. That's a little too much. If it tastes exactly like the ocean, it's a little bit too much salt. So what I do is I use kosher salt. So this is my Windsor kosher salt. My ratio is about 2 tablespoons for every liter of water.
Okay.
Which seems like a ton of salt. Like it really does seem like a ton of salt. But you have to remember when you're salting your water that most of the salt that you put into your water ends up in the drain, right? Like the pasta doesn't absorb all the water. It just, all the salt. It just absorbs the salt that's in the water that gets absorbed into the pasta, which is a very small amount. So it's, a little bit wasteful when you think about it, but really it's what you have to do. So 2 tablespoons of kosher per liter is a good salty pasta.
Okay.
If you don't like salt, cut it in half. And if you're using iodized salt or table salt, regular, table salt, then you use half of that. So no more than a tablespoon of iodized salt per liter of water. Okay. No more. That's pretty high. Okay, so our peas are in there. Next up, I'm going to add my asparagus. So our little asparagus spears go in. I'm just going to throw some all over the table too. Why not? And see, even the professionals make messes of their kitchen. And our little dice of zucchini goes in. And I'm not adding any salt. I don't know if anyone's picked up on that yet, but I'm not adding any salt to the dish for a very good reason. And that is the pasta water is the basis of our pasta salt.
Okay.
So because we have all the salt that's in our pasta water, that is going to become, our sauce. It's going to already be very, very seasoned. So if I start salting my vegetables now, I have a very, very good chance that I'm going to over season our sauce, sorry. So my water is almost at a boil, and I am going to cook my pasta next. So this is another thing about salting water. There's this big debate about whether you put the salt in first or you put the salt in once it boils. Have you heard about this, Jenny?
Yes, and you literally just asked my next question.
Oh, really? See, we're in sync. Yeah, so I mean, I've asked every chef that I know, Italian or not, when they put the salt in, and whatever they say, whether they say we put it in the beginning or we put it in at the end, my follow-up question is always why, and my answer has always been the same, because that's the way you do it. Because that's the way you do it. Well, what do you want to do? You want to put it in first? No, you put it in once it boils. I don't know. Adding salt to your water changes its, the salinity of the water, and it changes how quickly it comes to a boil, but it's infinitesimal. It's like, it's a matter of seconds. It's not like you're going to boil your pasta water 15 minutes quicker. So that's not the case. So I don't know. I usually let it go a little bit and then add it kind of halfway through. The one thing that I do is I have a tendency to put my water on and then let it boil, especially when I'm doing these classes, and then the water evaporates and I end up with half the amount of water that I have. So if I put my salt in too early, then it ends up being crazy salty. So I don't know if you noticed, but I had to add some more water like a couple minutes ago because it evaporated.
You did that fairly indiscreetly. I don't think anyone picked up.
Full disclosure here, full disclosure.
Okay,
so I'm going to add my pasta now. And generally when I do this, I kind of do the sauce while the pasta water is cooking. So like the entire process is done while in the 10 minutes it takes for the pasta water to cook. Sorry, the pasta to cook in the water. So now all of our ingredients are in here. We have, this is our last thing, are the little carrots. Okay. And we give it one last toss. And then I'm going to show everyone the sort of, I don't want to say easy, but the more foolproof way of making this. And that is, I'm going to remove the vegetables from the pan. Okay. I'm going to make the sauce in the same pan. And then I'm going to add the vegetables and the pasta all back together again. Okay. So generally in the restaurant, I teach my cooks to do it all in one pan, kind of take it easy on the dishwasher so they don't get mad at me. But it's kind of hard. You have to be really good at your timing. You have to know how long it's going to take for your sauce to be made. You have to know how long it's gonna, your vegetables can withstand the heat of being in the pan. So if you take it out, it's not going to get cold. You have this beautiful bowl of deliciousness. It's not going to get cold. Even if it hangs out over here for a minute or two, nothing is going to go bad.
Okay, so
This way,
can I just interrupt you for 1 second and
yeah,
ask
absolutely.
what pasta you're using? It looks like penne you dropped in the water there.
Yes. So I'm using a penne. When I make pasta primavera, I usually use a short pasta.
Okay.
Because I like the way that the vegetables and the pasta kind of come together and they kind of stick to each other. With a long noodle, I find that with the pasta primavera, that all the vegetables kind of fall to the bottom of the bowl. So you're eating your pasta and then you end up with a salad at the bottom of your bowl, a vegetable salad that you have to use a spoon to eat. So with short pasta, I just find it kind of comes together a little bit better. But, whatever you like. If you like long noodles, use long noodles. It's not going to ruin your dish. And like I always say, recipes are guidelines. Like if you're following me and you say, oh, I don't have zucchini in my fridge and you don't put zucchini in, it's not the end of the world. Okay, it's not going to ruin your dish. As long as you have some nice, brightly flavored vegetables, you should be okay. So now we're going to make our sauce. So again, I'm going to turn this on fairly low. I'm going to keep this on like number 2 setting. I'm going to take some pasta water, nice and salty pasta water, and I'm going to put it into my pan. Pan is still hot, so it'll come to a boil fairly quickly. And then we take our taleggio and we just scoop out all that gooey bit that's coming out of the middle. And you try not to lick it off the spoon. Actually, you can. If you're cooking for yourself, why not?
You totally could.
You totally could. So that goes into the water and you just sort of stir it around, let it dissolve. 2 things are going to happen here. One, the cheese is going to melt and it's going to make a nice creamy kind of sauce, but it's also going to pull up all the color from the bottom of the pan, from like sauteing your vegetables. So it will get a little bit of color in your sauce. I don't know if my camera's picking it up, but it does get a little bit orangey, which is okay. So now that the taleggio is warming up, it is getting very strong.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's a very flavorful sauce. So some people, when they make pasta sauces that are similar to this with like a cheese base, they will add cream to their sauce. I actually worked for a chef when I was a young cook who would do a similar sauce, but would make me use cornstarch to thicken it up. I don't know. It's just kind of cheating. And to me, it doesn't achieve what we really want. And that is the true flavor of the taleggio. Now, if you don't understand taleggio, and if you've only ever eaten, over-ripened taleggio, then you're going to think I'm crazy to make this sauce. You're going to think that I am going to overpower the vegetables. But honestly, it's not that strong. Like I said, it smells much stronger than it actually tastes. So when I say it's very aromatic right now, it's a very sweet aromatic. It's, yes, there's a little bit of, a little bit of funk to it, but not bad at all. That's why everyone should eat taleggio.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Having tried some in advance of this class.
Oh, nice.
Well, listen,
So,
I have to know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, taleggio is, it's a northern cheese made in Lombardia, a little bit in Veneto, a little bit in Piemonte. Like both of those other 2 regions have a small area in which you can produce the taleggio. And traditionally, it was aged in caves. Now, nowadays, there's not too many people who are aging their taleggio in caves anymore. It it just opens the door for a whole lot of problems with bacteria and humidity control. So there are some people who still do it, but those ones generally don't make it to our shore. They generally just stay in Italy, are usually consumed by the friends and family and people of the city in which they're produced. So the ones that we get here are not aged in caves, but still the conditions that it's aged in are very, very similar. They try and replicate the aging conditions of a cave. So high humidity, fairly cold, because we really want to get that mold growth happening. So now I just added a little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano.
Was
so a little bit of Emma.
Up the salt factor a little bit, chef, or no?
Sorry, what was that?
Did you add the Parmigiano to up the salt factor a little bit, or?
No, it's more just for the thickness of the sauce. It'll help thicken the sauce, but it also gives another dimension of flavor to the sauce. So now we add, our sauce is almost ready. So before it gets completely, thick, we're going to add our ingredients, our vegetables back in, and give it a little stir. Check your consistency here. Sometimes, well, quite often, there'll be a lot of water that will still come out of your vegetables and sort of thin out your sauce. So you can see my sauce has gotten quite thin. So we're just going to turn our burner back on and just give it a quick minute of simmering, coming to a boil. Now you'll notice when I put the cheese into the pasta water and I started making the sauce, I stirred it constantly. Like I was constantly stirring it. And even now I'm constantly stirring it. You sort of have to, because the cheese will sort of sink to the bottom of your pan and it'll stick and it'll burn and you will not have a very good experience, and you'll think that I gave you the worst recipe in the history of recipes. So please make sure that you keep on stirring it, and you really have to pay attention to it at this stage. Once the vegetables go in, it's all about getting the consistency of the sauce right. So you want it thick enough that it sticks to the pasta once you toss your pasta in, but not so thick that it's like a very poor carbonara. Like you want it to be fluid, but not too sloppy, not too wet.
Okay.
So I'm smelling this now, and I'm just going to add a little bit more Parmigiano because it just needs a little bit more to help thicken it up, but also just for the flavor, for the smell of it. I can smell it's a little heavy on the taleggio, and the Parmigiano will help cut it out.
Okay, so how much taleggio would you say you use per serving of pasta there?
So I use probably a tablespoon of taleggio, and I'm doing, one very good size portion. So now our pasta comes out, give it a little shake, make sure it's fairly dry. And what we want to do here is just leave it for a minute, okay? Leave it not in the water, out of the water, just to dry up a little bit. This steaming process, this drying process, helps make the exterior of the penne or the pasta, whatever pasta you happen to cook, nice and sticky and nice and starchy. So that starchiness will help. See, look, it's even sticking to my tongs. It doesn't want to come off my tongs. That starchiness will help the sauce cling to the actual noodles. So you can see now it's getting kind of sticky in my strainer. So I'm going to put it in. I'm going to give this all a little toss, and we just have a couple last things that we have to add to this. So once your pasta goes in, everything in there is hot. So I'm in no rush. I'm not in a rush to get it out of the pan and get it onto a plate. So I'm going to take this opportunity to do my last two ingredients, which is a little bit of basil. So a little bit of fresh basil, just to give it some brightness, and a little bit of parsley. So Italian flat leaf parsley, Very, very underrated. I'm not going to chop it and sprinkle it around the rim of the plate. I am going to actually put it in and cook it in the pasta, but a very large chop. You can see it's not a very fine dice or julienne of the herbs. They're nice big pieces because we want to see them. So this goes into our pan. We give it our last toss, and you can see that the sauce is sticking really nicely to our pasta. You can, let me do uber close up here. It's sticking nice and close, nice and tightly to the pasta, and it's drying up very nicely on the bottom of the pan. It's not too wet. So a little bit different. No, it's a lot different than a traditional pasta primavera that is, oil-based and very, very, I don't want to say thin, but the sauce is not this rich at all.
Okay.
So we have our bowl ready and we do our plating. So the hardest thing here is getting it into the plate without slopping it all over the place. So you take a nice little scoop, let it drip.
Colorful.
They take it up. See how it's dripping? Let it drip. Don't rush it. And then into your bowl. Another one, make sure you're getting right down into the bottom of the bowl because the sauce, even as soon as we turn off the heat, the pan starts to cool down. And so the cheese will start to congeal a little bit on the bottom of the pan. So you want to make sure you get down here, stir it all up, get all that beautiful stretchy cheese into the pan, into the plate. Save some nice pretty stuff for the top.
Gorgeous.
And if you want, you can, start going crazy with your garnish and putting all this fancy little garnish on here. I'm going to be very simple. Actually, you know what? I'm not even putting garnish on there. That's a pretty plate.
There you go.
It doesn't need garnish. To heck with you, garnish.
Okay, so I have to ask, what wine pairing would you do with this pasta dish?
I mean, taleggio, like I said, it's a fairly, it's a richer sort of cheese, so it can hold up to like a medium-bodied red. You don't necessarily have to stay with white.
Okay.
So like a nice Sangiovese would be awesome because Sangioveses tend to have like a nice vegetal sort of element to them. So that's probably what I would eat with this. But if someone was cooking it for me, I wouldn't say no to anything. So whatever wine they want to give me, I'm going to drink.
You will happily drink it. Okay. I just have one more question, if I may. Someone is asking, if you cannot find the taleggio, what would you substitute for that cheese in this recipe?
Another recipe. No, you can use any cheese in this style of pasta. I mean, really, this isn't a pasta primavera. It's not at all. It's it's a vegetable pasta with a cheese sauce. So anything would work well. You just want something that has a little bit of flavor. I mean, I make gorgonzola sauces like this all the time. Like you see gorgonzola cream sauces. So I do it without the cream. Exact same way. Pasta water, gorgonzola. You use a lot less gorgonzola when you do it that way, and you have a cleaner flavor, just like this taleggio we did today. So anything that has a lot of flavor, you can get away with. If you're afraid of overpowering your vegetables, then you can absolutely use a milder cheese. You can use like the Montasio we used last week. It doesn't melt nearly as well as the taleggio, the Montasio. So you need a lot of time in the water and whisking. But eventually, it'll break down and you'll get a nice sauce.
All right. Well, thank you, Chef. That dish looks incredible. My mouth is watering, as are the mouths of everybody who's watching tonight. They're all asking for your address.
Yay! Come on over. You can help me do dishes.
Well, thank you so much. That looks amazing, Chef. It's incredible dish. We got a lot of questions. I don't know if we answered to all the questions, but for sure, if there are any unanswered questions, we will make sure to let you know in the upcoming days and send you some answers. So thank you so much, Roberto, and thank you, Jenny, for being with us for these two to classes. It was great to have you with us. Keep following us and keep joining us for these amazing events. You were great. So it was really nice to have you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah.
You're the
My
best,
pleasure.
Jenny.
Anytime I can accompany Chef Roberto cooking, I will.
And I will also thank you, our sponsor for tonight, Jane K. Overwill, and all my colleagues at Eco Canada, in particular Astrid for coordinating the whole project, Ilaria, Monica, and Richard for the technical assistance, and Mary for the graphics and design. And don't forget to register for next week's Father Day special Tutti a Tavola on Tuesday, June 15. We will have a big surprise for you and more details in our upcoming communications. Grazie a tutti e buona serata. Arrivederci.